And And it is time. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Hacksmarter Live. My name is Tyler. I am your host. And hey, super awesome to have you taking the time to join me. Do want to let you know that I am live right now on 3 different platforms. You can join on whatever platform works best for you. But I am live right now on YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn. On YouTube and LinkedIn, you can find me just by searching for my name, Tyler Ramsby. And if you want to watch me on Twitch, I am Hack Smarter. So join whichever platform works best for you. But yo, super excited to have you here. Want to say a special shout out, at least to those of you in the chat over on YouTube. We got Chris Whitlock, we got Ralph Andre, we got Evan McGinnis, we got Harshal Beats, and we got Sarir Ahmed, who's a first-time viewer, at least for the live stream. Sarir said, "Hey Tyler, I am first time watching you live. How are you doing? It's 5:35 in the morning here in Turkey." First, dude, why are you up so early? And second, hey, it is great to have you here. I am doing well. Hope you're doing well, guys. I just got done boxing, doing some rounds with some people at the gym, got home, showered up, and here we are. Looking over at Twitch, we got Neffos, we got DJ Chateau, if I'm saying your name right. First time chat. What up, DJ Chateau? Good to have you here. In today's stream, I don't have a set plan, but the first thing I want to do is do a blue team lab from Pwn Lab. So I'll introduce what that is, and we'll dive into it. I need to start recording for YouTube. For those of you who might be new to my live stream, I call this Hack Smarter Live. This is where I make all my videos that I then post throughout the week on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to me on YouTube, YouTube is my main platform. Would encourage you to do so. And hey, if you appreciate what I do, I don't hide any of my content behind paywalls. I do all my coaching, all my resources, all completely free of charge as a way of giving back. But if you do want to support me, you can do it in really a few different ways. On YouTube, I do have membership. I have a basic membership and a super membership. But just to be clear, once again, unlike other content creators, if you become a member, you don't get special perks because I don't want anyone to have a barrier to my content, but it is a way that you can show your support. So you can become a member on the YouTube side of things, or you can do a one-time super chat over on YouTube. Over on Twitch, I enabled subscribers, which I'm still kind of a noob at Twitch. I don't know how all of that works, but if you subscribe, I think it's like a monthly thing, a monthly payment to support the channel. So you can do that on Twitch. On LinkedIn, LinkedIn's broken half the time anyway, so I don't recommend giving any money through LinkedIn. The money will probably fall apart. At least their live stream is always broken. The live stream itself is good, but I can never see the chat very well. So if you are on LinkedIn and you leave a comment and I don't respond to you, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because LinkedIn doesn't show me comments. But if you join me on YouTube and Twitch, I got my eyes open on both of those and will keep my eyes on that. More like Chateau if you're trying to get the pronunciation right. You're pretty close. You're right, it is Chateau. I remember original Call of Duty. I'm curious in chat, did anyone play Call of Duty 1? Like not the Call of Duty one you heard about. The original, the first ever Call of Duty game. It was a PC game. I believe it came out in 2007. That was like one of my first-person shooters I really got into. And your name reminds me of the map on there. One of my favorite maps on there was MP_Chateau. And it was a chateau, as you can imagine. Neffels played it, dude. That was the best. Well, I wouldn't say the best Call of Duty. The best Call of Duty was the what was it called? It's like, I can't think of the right word, but there was a game that went on top of the original Call of Duty called Call of Duty United Offensive. Call of Duty United Offensive was a game ahead of its time. So if you never played United Offensive, expansion pack, that's what I was looking for. Before the games had these stupid subscription models for things, you could get like an entire game expansion pack to it. And United Offensive added tanks and jeeps and much larger maps. I loved United Offensive. Like, I still play that occasionally today, that game from 2007, 2008. That was the most OG, best OP Call of Duty game in my experience. But all right, maybe one day soon, y'all, we will do a classic Call of Duty stream. We'll jump on one of these old school Call of Duties and I'll show off my skills, but not today. Chris said, I played EverQuest. I remember when EverQuest used to be called EverCrack. Do you guys remember that? Because EverQuest, like even before WoW, EverQuest was so addicting. People called it EverCrack. Yeah, I played EverQuest, WoW, RuneScape, Crossfire, Combat Arms. Yeah, dude, Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is what's up. My first Counter-Strike game, I started with CS 1.5. Then I played Condition Zero, even like the single-player campaign and the multiplayer version of Condition Zero. I played way too much Counter-Strike Source, played a bit of Global Offensive, and occasionally now I play Counter-Strike 2. So yeah, dude, I'm also a big Counter-Strike fan. From the beginning, from the 1.6 days. I didn't play 1.5 or anything, but 1.6. And like I remember playing like FY Ice World, the zombie mode, all of that stuff was great. Yo, Chris, I never got into Half-Life, dude. No, I don't even know if I've played the single player versions of Half-Life. Like I know Counter-Strike's a Half-Life mod. I've played mods of Half-Life. I don't think I actually played the Half-Life games. I do want to play the Half-Life VR game. I've heard good things about that. I have a Quest 3 headset and I have a nice gaming computer, so I could do the link and play the Half-Life. I don't remember what it's called, but it's the VR mode. That would probably be a lot of fun. Yeah, dude, Far Cry 1 was cool too. I also played Far Cry 1. I remember being just in awe of the graphics when Far Cry came out. Man, memory lane nostalgia when it comes to gaming. But all right, I'm going to start recording for YouTube. We're going to dive into this lab and see if we can put on our blue hat. All I have is a black hat. I'm not going to take my black hat off. If I had a blue hat, I'd put it on. So you'll just have to imagine this is a blue hat, and we're going to be the blue team for a little bit today. Let me go ahead and start recording. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to work through the Remediate vulnerabilities with Amazon Inspector Lab on Pwn Labs. This is a blue team lab, so we will take off our black hat, but I don't have a blue hat, so I'm just leaving my black hat on. But we are going to be on the blue team. We're going to do some vulnerability management, some vulnerability remediation. And hey, if you haven't heard of Pwn Labs, you need to check it out. Pwn Labs at pwnlabs.io. It's sort of like try hack me and hack the box, but it's all for the cloud. So they have hands-on labs, both red team and blue team, covering AWS, Azure, and GCP. Even if you sign up for a free account, I believe there's around 40 labs that are completely free that you can try out. But if you get a premium account, that's only $200 a year, super affordable for cloud training. And not only do you get access to all the premium labs, you get access to the cyber ranges. You'll get 2 every year. The most recent and first cyber range is Thunderdome, which is like an enterprise red team environment where you have to compromise AWS, Azure, and GCP and pivot throughout an enterprise environment to get 9 different flags. So hey, Pwn Labs is awesome. I'm a big fan, but let me go ahead and share my screen. This is a premium lab, so if you do not have a premium subscription to Pwn Labs, you will not be able to follow along with me. You'll have to live vicariously through me. But if you do have a premium subscription, hey, let's do this together. Get signed into Pwn Labs, find this lab, hit lab on, pause the video. It takes just a few minutes for the lab to start up, and then unpause the video, and let's do this together. Now, this one is not suitable for a CTF approach. So when you're doing Pwn Labs, it will tell you, hey, this can be done as a CTF, which means here's your initial access. You can dive into it, black box, see if you can figure it out. Other ones are more like guided labs. I think of like guided rooms on Try Hack Me. So the ones that are guided labs will say it's not suitable for a CTF approach. So that's what's going on there. And I also want to say, you might be brand new to the cloud, brand new to AWS. All the language is confusing to you. Yo, all of it's confusing to me as well. I'm going to do my best as we work our way through this to slow down, explain some of the terminology, some of the background about what is going on. So even if you're brand new to the cloud, you've never even messed with AWS, I think you'll be able to follow along and learn something through this process. But let's go ahead and dive into it. I'll just zoom in here. Here's our scenario. As part of our efforts to increase buy-in and to drive forward security improvements in engineering, we are collabing with the DevOps team in a security assessment of their Elastic Container Registry, image deployment templates, and Lambda function. So let me show you what to do. If you are seeking to learn this for the first time, and I'm going to stop sharing because I might have to authenticate real quick. All right, here we go. So if you are just learning AWS or Azure or GCP for the first time, you're constantly going to come across phrases that are confusing to you. So let's first figure out Elastic Container Registry, and we'll ask ChatGPT, what is the in AWS? Give me a short summary, right? So this is in AWS is a fully managed container image registry. So think about Docker that allows developers to store, manage, and deploy Docker container images. It integrates seamlessly with Amazon ECS, EKS, and Lambda, which we'll talk about, providing a secure and scalable environment for container image storage. ECR simplifies the development workflow by enabling developers to push and pull container images with high availability and reliability, backed by the security and compliance features of AWS. So as you can imagine, if we have a container that has vulnerabilities in it and the DevOps team is pushing out this container or it's implementing in a workflow, hey, that's not going to be good. So we want to make sure we identify those vulnerabilities before those containers are pushed out into production. So that is our scenario. So we know that now is a place that we store things like Docker containers, but we have this new phrase that might be new to you if you're new to AWS. So let's ask about Lambda functions. How about Lambda functions? AWS Lambda is a serverless, which, that's always misleading because technically there's always a server on the back end running these things, but a serverless compute service that allows you to run code without provisioning, I'll try to zoom in here, or managing servers. With Lambda, you can execute code in response to various events, such as changes to data in an Amazon S3 bucket, that's kind of where you store stuff, updates to a DynamoDB table, that's like a SQL table, or HTTP requests via API gateway. You simply upload your code. Python is one of the most popular things here, and Lambda takes care of everything required to run and scale your code with high availability. You are built only for the compute time you consume, making it a cost-effective solution for many applications. Lambda supports a variety of programming language and integrates with other AWS services, enabling you to build complex, scalable applications with ease. So what should stand out to you is the fact that we are uploading our own code. Well, code can have vulnerabilities in it. I mean, that's where vulnerabilities come from. If user input is not sanitized, things along those lines, it's in your code, and you want to identify that before you deploy Lambda and you're running all these processes, because a user might interact with the Lambda. Maybe it's a customer, maybe a customer's account gets hijacked, and if you don't have solid code on the back end, they'll be able to abuse that and pivot into your AWS environment. So as a blue teamer, we need to slow down and make sure we're checking these things pretty deeply before we deploy them to prod. Looking over at comments, Cyber Warrior said, how is it being a pen tester? Thinking about a career switch looks interesting. Pen testing is amazing. I mean, I absolutely love my job as a pen tester. I mean, I love it so much. I do it during the day, and then half the time I'm on stream at night doing more pen testing type things just for fun. But I will say, pen testing is not for everyone. Like, it really is a grind. You have to constantly be learning. I know from experience, y'all, some IT jobs, honestly, many IT jobs, when you get an IT job, a lot of it is just responding to fires, which means you'll have a lot of downtime where you don't have to really do much. I mean, you can waste that time on Reddit. If you are in one of those jobs now, I would encourage you to learn during that downtime. But many IT jobs have a lot of downtime, but then you're available for that time to put out fires. Pen testing is not like that. If you're a pen tester, you are consistently busy because, like, for example, I am a security consultant, so I work with different clients, different companies all over the United States, sometimes the world, and I usually have a different engagement every single week or every few weeks, depending on how long the engagement is. So every single day, I am grinding things out. I am hands-on keyboard, exploiting, hacking, writing reports. So if you want a job that it just allows you to kind of drift and take it easy, pen testing is not for you. Additionally, you're always having to learn new things, new technology. As a consultant, I'm dropped into like a new customer environment every single week. I have to learn a new technology stack quickly. I need to research what's going on, and I need to understand enough to abuse like business logic flaws and find vulnerabilities. So personally, it fits my personality. I love it, but I just want to be clear. It is not for everyone. Doc G Money said, man, I've been stuck the last few days on an AI CTF. It's been super difficult here for a bit of a break. Thank you for being live. Hey, thank you, my friend, for joining. And what CTF? If you don't mind me asking, would love to also check it out if it's like a public CTF. But let's go into here. What are our lab prerequisites? We need a basic knowledge of vulnerability classes affecting web apps. I think I have that. And hey, if you don't have it, I will explain things as we go. And a basic knowledge of Docker. So, let's just even pause there. How about Docker? ChatGPT can probably explain it better than me. So if you don't know what Docker is, I'll just highlight some of the big things here. So it's an open source platform designed to automate the deployment, scaling, and management of applications using containerization. It's sort of like virtual machines in some ways, like ones that you spin up quickly, because you can use Dockers for web servers, applications, all of that. They're lightweight, portable, self-sufficient. But I think of Dockers almost like mini virtual machines inside your computer that are isolated from each other as you run different things. So that's what the Docker containers are, and you can spin them up. There's an entire website called like Docker Hub, which is actually where I recommend doing CVE hunting at. Is Docker Hub going to work? Yes, maybe. Right, so we can go to Docker Hub, and if I do like, it looks like a social media website, right? This is all in Docker Hub. Generally, if you scroll down, it will tell you exactly how you can run this image. So if I type this into my command line right now, what it's going to do is actually spin up an instance of this application on port 80, it looks like, and then we're able to log into it. It's hosted locally. We can look for vulnerabilities. We can try to exploit it, and I actually recommend this in my video on CVEs. Go to Docker Hub and just like use Docker Hub as if it's try hack me or hack the box. Spin up these images and try to find exploits in them, and if you find exploits, report them to the vendor, report them to MITRE, and that's how you can get CVEs. But that's what Docker is, and that is Docker Hub. So what are our learning outcomes? We're going to use Amazon Inspector to remediate vulnerabilities in Lambda and ECR, remember Elastic Container Registry. We're going to use various third-party tools, right, defense in depth, to assess ECR image security. We're going to evaluate risk and impact and decide whether to action or suppress findings. And here's our real-world context. Vulnerability management is a key aspect of enterprise security, and it is. Actually, my first cybersecurity job was working for a large bank. Actually, it was a credit union, a large credit union, and I did vulnerability management. I think my job title was senior. Oh, I'm going to forget this. It was very long. Senior technical compliance analyst, maybe, but it was vulnerability management. Most of my job was using Nessus across a large enterprise environment. We would identify vulnerabilities, and then we would use SCCM, I think is what it was, to use PowerShell to detect and then deploy scripts to fix those vulnerabilities. So vulnerability management really is an awesome job. It pays super well. I actually took a pay cut to go from being a blue teamer to a pen tester. So I was paid more when I was a blue teamer than when I was a pen tester. Well, now I get paid more, but when I started as a junior pen tester, it was a pay cut. Now that I'm career and mid-level pen tester, I get paid now more than I did when I was a blue teamer. But that's what I did on the blue team side of things. Having always on tools that can automate the process of uncovering, I see a typo here, I'll have to let Ian know about it. Uncovering vulnerabilities is a perfect complement to manual pen testing and red teaming. Amazon Inspector can be great as part of a layered defensive suite and identify exploitable vulnerabilities in Lambda packages and code, EC2 instances, and Elastic Container Registry. And I just want to say, if you guys have any questions as I go through this, if I'm going too fast, those of you watching live, hey, go ahead and stop me, ask your question in the chat. As I finish stuff, I'll try to look over. Oh, you're doing Gandalf. The first 7 levels I beat in less than 10 minutes. This last level has me stuck and really down some deep AI rabbit holes. Really getting to understand the tech, though. That's awesome. I'll have to check it out. I've only did a few levels of Gandalf. Ralph said, I recently got my PNPT cert as my first pen test cert. Just finished the course materials for PJWT from TCM. Any tips for any other certs that I can take for web hacking specifically? I think like you have the PNPT. That's a solid cert. You may not even need to get more certs. I would recommend doing the training for the website of things, but then go immediately to trying to find CVEs and open source applications with the web. I just shared a little bit about that. I have a YouTube video about that. But if you get a CVE on your resume, that's going to help you stand out more than a cert, and you can get that CVE faster than you get a cert, and it will cost you less money. All right, what up, Vin? Good to have you here. Let's keep going. A walkthrough. Let's dive in. As part of our security assessment in collaboration with the DevOps team, we'll check out their Elastic Container Registry image deployment templates and Lambda functions. First, we're going to log in as a dev user via the AWS Console, and we're going to do US West 2 region. Let me explain this a little bit. If we scroll back up here, here's our access key and our secret access key. If I zoom out, it'll look a little bit better. But what these are when it comes to AWS, these are kind of like a username and a password. Your access key ID in and of itself isn't necessarily a sensitive value, though people can get your AWS account number from it, but not sensitive in and of itself. But the secret access key is. That is like your password for logging into the AWS CLI or the command line interface directly on your terminal. You can authenticate to AWS. So let me show you how we can do that. We'll do AWS configure. I'm just going to configure my main profile here, and we're going to ask for an access key ID. So let's go ahead and grab that. And then we need a secret access key. So let's go ahead and grab that. And it said we want to do US West 2. We'll hit enter, enter. And now one way to confirm that it worked is something called, it's like the who am I command, right? In Linux, you can do who am I because it's easy. Well, AWS has to make everything overly confusing. So to do this in AWS, it's AWS STS get caller identity. And there we go. We are logged into this account. We have our user ID there. We have our account number, and we have the ARN for our account. And we can see we are the dev user in the account. So far, so good. We are authenticated in. Let's keep on scrolling. We are logged in here. All right, first we checked an S3 bucket that stored the deployment templates and found the following Docker files. That's just saying, like, in this scenario, we ourselves aren't checking the S3 bucket, but it's just telling us here's the scenario, here's how we got this information. Now, let's just ask this if we are new to all of this and we don't know terminology. Once again, guys, ChatGPT comes in clutch. What is a Docker file? So it's a text file that contains a set of instructions used to build a Docker image. So the Docker image is what we're talking about. Each instruction in a Docker file specifies a step that Docker will execute to assemble the image. These steps include defining the base image, installing software packages, so we could look for that or any of the software packages outdated, copying files, setting environment variables, and running commands. Docker files enable you to automate the creation of consistent and reproducible container images, right? Here's an example of it, explaining everything that is going on. But that is what this file is. Here is our Docker file from the DevOps team, and this is what we're testing to see if we can find any vulnerabilities. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. We'll open up our terminal. We'll do cd pwn labs. We'll make a directory, and we'll just call it inspector, cd inspector, nano Docker file, and I'm going to paste this in. And what I'm doing with nano, if you're new to Linux, nano is sort of like a notepad on Windows. It's just a text editor. And once I type this in to save it, it's a little bit confusing, but you see this caret key right here? That means hit your control key on your keyboard. So we're going to do control X, and then it's going to say, do you want to save it? We're going to do Y, click Y on your keyboard, and then file name to write. Well, we just want to keep Docker file, so I'm going to hit enter. All right, and we can cat that out and make sure it's saved, and it did. There is our Docker file. Let's jump back over to this. The Docker file references package.json. Right there. Copy only the package.json file to use for installing node modules. So since it references package.json, we probably need that file. And so here is package.json showing what dependencies we are using. Let's go ahead and copy this and also create it locally. So I'll do nano package.json like that. I'm going to paste it in. Same process, control X, Y, enter, and there we go. We have that done. Now let's deploy it. Install Docker for your OS, which if you don't have Docker installed, you can do that. Follow the steps there. I believe I have it installed. And I do. Docker-V just shows me I do have Docker installed. We can authenticate Docker to the Amazon Elastic Container Registry with get login password by running this is what I mean by AWS being confusing. By running the AWS ECR get login password command. It has to be, 15 freaking words. Then when using the Docker login command with gain authentication token, we need to set the username to AWS and provide the URI or the URL of the Amazon ECR registry we want to authenticate to. The following command retrieves an authentication token from AWS ECR's dev user, gets the AWS account ID using AWS STS, and uses these to authenticate the Docker client to the ECR repository in the specified region. This setup allows the Docker client to push and pull images to and from. All right. This is confusing, I know, so let me explain this a little bit. Okay? Let's walk through this. So the first thing we're doing is this Amazon command, and this is just how we authenticate to ECR. Remember, ECR is the Elastic Container Registry, and is this service in AWS for deploying and managing images such as Docker container images. So this is AWS ECR get login password. So we're authenticating in the region US West 2. And then after we do that, we are piping. So we're now logging into Docker, and we're doing Docker login and username AWS. The reason the username is AWS is we're authenticating via our AWS profile into Docker so we can interact with ECR, and then password standard definition. And then we're doing a command in here. All this is doing is getting our account ID, and that's how we're figuring out what our URI is for the Amazon Container Registries. Your account ID and then .dkr, .ecr, .us west 2, Amazon AWS. So let me just show you this standalone to show you what it's doing. If I copy this, see, it's just giving us our account ID. So all this command is doing this. If I copy my account ID, this is the URL that it's specifying: dkr.ecr.us west2.amazonaws.com. It's just putting it directly in the command, so we have a one-liner. So here's also just a helpful learning technique. When you're going through a lab like this and it gives you a one-liner that does the whole thing for you, that's awesome, but would encourage you to slow down and make sure you understand what that one-liner is doing. Don't just copy and paste because you don't learn that way. So do what I just did, like paste it into Mousepad or Notepad and look at it slowly so you know what is going on here. And if anything is confusing, do some deeper digging and dig into it so you know what command you are running. But for now, I will go ahead and copy that, paste it in, and I am not in the Docker group. Let me remember how to do that. Okay, that's all I have to do. Oh, I have to log in and log out. Oh, okay, sweet. So let me just add my user to the Docker group. You may have to do this as well, or else you have to sudo everything. All right, let's give this a shot now. If I go back to our command that we were trying to run, let me go this. And then it works. So you can see we successfully logged into Docker. We can interact with ECR. Let's jump back to our walkthrough. Now we're going to build the Docker image. Now what building the Docker image is taking that Docker file and building it. And the Docker file, of course, references the package.json. So it's going to use all that information to build our Docker image. So let's go ahead and do that. It's docker build-t. So that's what we're calling it. And then we're just specifying all the build files. The Docker file is in our current directory. That's all this command is. So we can copy that, jump back over to here. And just to show you that, there's our Docker file, our package.json. If you do this in a different directory, it's not going to work because we're specifying, hey, with this period or this dot right here, we're specifying do this in the current directory. And it's going to go ahead and build that for us. While that does it, let's continue to look at what we're going to do next. Must be getting a cold. All right, first, we need to prepare the logistic app Docker image for uploading to a specific AWS ECR repository. Now, let's slow this down. We already asked ChatGPT, we already defined these terms. So we have our Docker image, sort of like that virtual machine inside your computer. And then we have ECR, remember, Elastic Container Registry. It is the service in AWS that you manage container images, deploy container images, such as Docker files. So we're going to prepare it for uploading to a specific ECR repository in our account by giving it a tag. So you can think of even like a YouTube video. When you upload a YouTube video, you can specify tags. That's kind of what we're doing here. We're tagging it so it goes to the right spot that matches the repository's URI or URL. This step is necessary before we can push the Docker image to AWS ECR, as the image needs to be tagged with the ECR repository URI. Your deployed lab instance will have a different AWS account ID, so we again retrieve this using STS with the security token service. Is this done? It is. So once again, let's grab this command so we can understand what is going on. So the first part is pretty clear. It's a Docker command. We're Docker tag, and then we're specifying the Docker image we are tagging. Remember, we just called it logistic.app. Let me scroll up right there, logistic.app. So we're tagging the logistic.app, and then we're just running that same command to get our account ID, right? This is confusing when you first see it, but remember, all this is doing is getting our account ID. So really, it's just to get this URL, right? This is the URL it's given us. Like whatever your account ID is, .dkr.ecr.us west2.amazonaws.com logistic app. That is all that is doing in those parentheses, just getting our account ID. You can do it manually, but because as people do this lab, all of us are going to have different AWS account IDs. The lab guide does it this way, so people don't get confused by trying to use the wrong account ID. So we're going to tag our Docker image. All right, so far so good. Let's jump back over to the lab. It says now we can upload the Docker image to the AWS ECR. So the Docker image is built, it is tagged, we're gonna upload to AWS, and let's once again look at this command line and understand what is going on. So doing Docker push, a common Docker file, so push or upload, you can think about it along those lines. Once again, this command should look familiar to you. It's just a one-liner to get our account ID, and then we're pushing it to this URL, which is the URL in AWS for ECR. Let's grab that. Let's go ahead and run it. Fingers crossed. And it looks like it is working. So it's pushing this out into AWS. When this is done, it should be in our AWS account in the US West 2 region. Let me jump over to this. So that was successful. Next, we need our dev user password so we can log into the AWS Console and use Amazon Inspector. So right now, we only have CLI access. We're just going to create a password for our user so we can log into the Amazon Console, because that's what we're going to use Amazon Inspector inside of the GUI of the console. Let me look over at chat and make sure I'm not missing anything. Hack the Box CPTS versus Offset's OSCP. What would be a better cert to have in 2024? I say this with pain in my heart, but it would be the OSCP. The CPTS is far better training, far more realistic cert, but OSCP is still king when it comes to name recognition. Doc G Money said, is Linux Plus worth it for us pen testers in your opinion? Or if you can CTF, you will be fine. I never see this as a cert mentioned for employment, so my gut says you're fine if you can CTF. Yeah, I mean, the training for the Linux Plus is solid, but I don't think you actually need the cert. And that's how I learned Linux, is literally just doing CTFs. Well, I guess there's a few ways. Doing CTFs is a great way to learn, but I also run Ubuntu as my primary OS, at least like on my work computer, which is what I'm on the majority of the day. My computer right here is Windows only because I use it for gaming, and I had some issues when I was running Ubuntu and NVIDIA. But like the vast majority of the day, I am on Ubuntu. So I also recommend that if you want to get good with Linux, just start using it for your day-to-day tasks. And then GPT is amazing now for learning Linux as you run into issues. What up, Reckless Gizmo? Good to have you here. So let's go ahead and set a password for our user, and you can kind of see what this command is doing. AWS IAM update login profile. Our username is, of course, dev user, and then we're giving it a secure password. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to give it the same password I use for my bank account. There we go. And now we should be able to log into the AWS console. And I don't know if I'm logged into the console already, so just give me a second. All right, no, I'm not. So what information we need is our account ID, our username, and our password. So we know our username is dev user, password is hack smarter123, and we need to get our account ID. There's a few different ways we can do that, but we can use this one-liner we've been using throughout the lab to get our account ID. And there is our account ID, so we'll copy that, jump back over to here, paste that in, and it should allow us to sign in. I'm actually going to pull this out just so I can tab back and forth. All right, we are logged into the account. After logging in, change the region to US West 2. So if you're new to AWS or just cloud in general, all these clouds have different regions that you deploy services in. So if you can't find a resource you're looking for, there's a good chance it's in a different region. So you can see right now we're in US East 1. We need to switch over to US West 2. And here we are. Here's Amazon Inspector right there, actually. You can also search for it and open Amazon Inspector. There are a few notifications that appear, and once closed, you see the dashboard below. Let's just look at this together. So we have all this crap. Just feedback. Bro, just leave me alone, homie. Let's close this stuff out. Okay. So if we look at this, we have our ECR container, EC2 instance. We have nothing there. We have some risk-based remediations right here. And we have our ECR repo with most critical findings. So you can see our logistic app has 2 critical findings and 20 findings. Clicking on the 2 critical ECR container findings. So let's go ahead and look at that. We can go right here, critical. So we have 2 critical findings, IP and tough cookie. Let's just look at these ourselves. So as the IP package before 1.1.9 for Node.js might allow SSRF or server-side request forward you, which is a bad deal in the cloud because an attacker can use that to get AWS creds from the metadata endpoint. Because some IP addresses, such as whatever that is, are improperly categorized as globally routable via is public. Okay, so if we are vulnerable to that, we definitely want to fix it. And we have tough cookie. Versions of the package tough cookie before 4.1.3 are vulnerable to prototype pollution due to improper handling of cookies when using cookie jar in reject public suffixes equals false mode. This issue arises from the manner in which the objects are initialized. And if we go back to here, so we have tough cookie 4.1.3 before 4.1.3. So I think that is going to be a false positive. It must just be looking for the string 4.1.3, whereas ours is not actually vulnerable. The IP was 1.1.9. And we actually are at 2.0.1. I wonder why it thought we're vulnerable to that as well. Before 1.1.9, 2.0.1. I wonder what it's using to find that information. But I think both of those are false positives. Let's look back at the lab guide. Clicking on tough cookie, we see a prototype pollution vuln, which we already found, for which a public POC is available. This can most likely result in a DOS, but potentially there are less likely edge cases for remote code execution and property injection. We can see this affects versions of tough cookie before 4.1.3. At the time of writing, the latest version of tough cookie is 4.13. This is also the version that we have included in our package.json. Is it? Sure looks like 4.1.3 to me, not 4.13. But either way, it wouldn't be vulnerable, right? So it's a false positive, like I said. Okay, turning to the IP package, we see that versions prior to 1.1.9, but also version 2.0.0. Oh, maybe that's why it's discovering it, because we're 2.0.1. So it's just seeing the 2.0 and saying, hey, you're vulnerable. Versions 1.1.9 and 2.0.1 are not affected. The impact is that threat actors may be able to access other services, blah, blah. I already talked about that. So we're going to create a suppression rule, which we have a lot of stuff there. Let's see if I can do it an easier way. The way we can create a suppression rule, if we go back to, I think, findings. Yeah, so here's all of our findings. We can go ahead and create a suppression rule here. And we will call this, I'm going to zoom out just so I can see the background a little bit. IP false positive. We'll say CVE 2023 42282 is a false positive and needs to be suppressed. And now we can add a filter. So we have different pieces of information we can add. Now, if you're doing this in the real world, you want to be careful that you don't accidentally suppress other vulnerabilities. I'm going to do it in an easy way, but once again, I don't recommend doing this in the actual real world because you don't want to suppress other vulnerabilities and other containers on accident that might actually be vulnerable to this. But one way we could do this is just by title, I would think. And we could say title starts with CVE 2023 42282. So once again, just want to be very clear. If you're doing this in the real world, you want it to look more like this, where you're specifying the type, all this information. I just don't feel like going through the time right now on stream to do that. So I'm just going to go by title begins with, but don't do this in the real world because you can imagine if there's another container that actually is vulnerable to this, it's not going to show up because we're suppressing anything that starts with that, right? So I'm doing it as a quick way of fixing this one. Don't do it in the real world. All right. But we did that. We can go ahead and it says our suppression rule was created. I think it takes a little bit of time to update as well. Let's create another one for this tough cookie. So we'll create a suppression rule and we'll call this tough cookie false positive. And this one is CVE 2023 26136, I think. Oh, maybe I should turn let them lock on. Right, 26136. And once again, we can do our title starts with okay. I think it takes a little bit for those findings to actually go in place. Let's see. Let's see if it does. We'll give it some time. We'll continue the lab. But like I said, I think it takes a little bit for it to rescan and for the suppression rules to go in place. Can I refresh? Does that do anything? And maybe you do have to go through all of the process that we saw on the other page. We'll come back to it. Let's just continue with the lab and see if it ends up going through. It's important to adopt a defense in-depth and detect in-depth approach to security. We can also use npm and the npm check updates package to identify outdated and potentially vulnerable packages. I don't even think I have npm installed. All right, we'll give that a shot. Oh, hey, look, those ones that we saw are gone now. Our suppression rule successfully got rid of those false positives. But look at this. Our total, and we have some things we'd want to deal with. I'm guessing we're going to get to it on, is it the Lambda function? We have these code vulnerabilities. We have a SQL injection and a log injection, which could lead to RCE. I bet we'll come to that. But you can see it suppressed the other finding that we wanted to suppress. And how's this going? Okay, that's taking some time. Let's look at what we're going to do. So we're going to install npm, and then with npm, which is the node package manager, I think that's what it stands for, we're going to install just a tool via npm that will check for update. So what it's going to do is it's going to go through our package.json, so the thing that our Docker file is referring to when we make our Docker image, and it's going to check to see if anything is outdated, which Inspector did that, but once again, this defense in depth and detect in depth is important. There are things that one tool may find that another tool may miss. So if you can imagine, we're deploying this into production, into a real world environment. You want to be absolutely certain you don't have any high or critical vulnerabilities that are going to be exploited by a threat actor that they're going to use to then pivot into your organization, steal sensitive data, and all of those shenanigans. This is just about done. Good time for a drink of water, I think. Hey, what up, Zach? Over on YouTube. Good to have you here, my friend. What? All right, who cares? YOLO. All right, let's go ahead and see if we can install this and run it. Oh, we're getting permission denied. All right, let's do the same command but sudo it. Okay, so we have one thing that says, hey, this move file is depreciated. It's been moved to npm CLI FS. 67 packages looking for funding. So we have, I think, one that's depreciated. Is that what we're supposed to be looking for? Yeah, so running npm check updates or NCU reveals that the GOT and semver packages are outdated. So do I need to run that too? Okay, so running NCU right there. We have this depreciated package, and we have GOT, semver, and tough cookie are all outdated now, right? GOT, our current one is 12.1.0. It can be upgraded to this. Semver is that. Now, you would want to make sure it doesn't break any functionality before we actually do it. But assuming that the code has been tested with later package versions, we can update our package with ncm-u, and it actually tells us that there. So let's do that, and it should automatically update our packages. There we go. Do I need to do npm install now? Oh no, it upgraded. You can see we have our GOT is now 4.2.1. Our semver is now 7.6.2. And our tough cookie is 4.1.4. So that did successfully updated it. Sneak have also created a package JSON health checker that we can use. All right. Let's go ahead and give this a shot. Pwn Labs, inspector, upload our package.json and see what this says about it. All right, so it says we have healthy, sustainable, and two things that need review. So let's check out these two things that need review ourselves first, and we'll look back at the walkthrough. So we have HTTP cache semantics, parses, cache control, and other headers, etc., etc. Oh, so the reason it needs review is its maintenance is inactive. The last release was 1 year ago. Last commit was 6 months ago. We have 1 open pull request and 9 open issues. So just saying, hey, it's not being maintained. So if there's a vulnerability for it, we might have some issues. And we have TaffyDB here, right here. It says security issues found. So we have this. What's this? Internal property tampering. And that seems to affect, even the most recent one, 2.7.3 is vulnerable. And this one has not been, oh geez, the last release was 8 years ago. Yeah, I would say maybe we don't want to be using this in our Docker file. Let's go back to this. We see the latest update. That was a year ago at the time I ran the check. Yep. It also identifies a high severity vulnerability affecting TaffyDB that is not actively maintained. The internal property tampering vulnerability could potentially allow threat actors to access internal database items and inject arbitrary SQL statements that could potentially escalate to RCE depending on server configuration, i.e. upload a web shell. The latest version of TaffyDB is 2.7.3, which is a version of our package.json. Zach over on YouTube said, how similar is Linux Windows priv escalation to AWS Cloud? Honestly, it's not similar at all. Completely different worlds if you're doing privilege escalation in the cloud. With the cloud, it's a lot about like looking at IAM policies, looking at functions you can invoke in order to elevate your privileges. Some of the thinking is similar, but you can't like apply linpiece to the cloud unless you're trying to escalate privileges on a virtual machine to then like do an SSRF request to get creds, but otherwise completely different ballpark. So given the risk, as it's not critical to development workflows. So like in the real world environment, here's how this would work. If we are the blue team and we're auditing this for the DevOps team, we would want to make a report about this or bring this up to them and just ask them, hey, can you guys test these packages? Do we actually need them, or are we good to remove them? And often there's like a change control process you go through where it goes to testing and dev, and then you get the go ahead to remove these packages before pushing it out to prod. And so that would be the process here. So let's pretend like we did that process and the DevOps team said, no, it's not critical to development workflows. We can remove it. We can remove it from the package.json, and we're going to run one more tool, it looks like, of npm audit, which also might identify these issues. So once again, defense in depth, detection in depth. Let's give that a shot. When in doubt, sudo it. I thought I created a lock file. I guess it didn't. All right, this command requires an existing lock file. Try creating one first. All right, word. Let's try one. I don't know what I'm doing. Isn't that what y'all told me to do? npm-i package lock only. Complete log of this run can be found here. Bro, I don't even know how to make the lock file. I thought it did automatically when you deployed stuff. Let's see if we can figure it out. Or let's rather see if our robot can figure it out. Okay, I thought I did that, but shorthanded way. There we go. Now it doesn't. Now we can do npm audit, which I think it just did for us. So now if we run npm audit, you can see it finds TaffyDB, severity high. TaffyDB can allow access to any datum items in the database. Yeah, that's not a good idea. And there's no fix available. So bad idea. We want to get that removed. If we jump back to our lab right here. So let's remove Taffy. Are we only removing TaffyDB? Are we removing the other one as well? The parsing thing. Oh, I think we're just removing TaffyDB. All right. So to do that, we can do nano package.json. And we can literally just delete it. I can probably remove the package lock too. All right, so we package.json is fixed now. And now, oh, I guess I shouldn't remove the package lock here. Let me just redo that real quick. All right, so now you can even see it there. But if we do npm audit, we found 0 vulnerabilities now, so we're good to go. All right, now let's build our image again with the more secure package.json. So we're just going to go through those same steps we did before. I'm not going to explain this again since we explained it as we were working our way through it. So docker build t logistic app dot, that's just in our current directory. So let's go ahead and grab that. Ultron 22, I have no idea what you're talking about over on YouTube. And now we're going to tag the image. These are, once again, I'm not going to explain these. These are the same commands we've already run when I was going through it in the beginning, and I slowed down and explained it then. So if you weren't here for the beginning of the video, you can either rewind the live stream and watch it. Otherwise, when I upload the standalone video, you can catch the full explanation when I was going through these commands. I don't know if it's going to work with the way I did those commands like that, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't think it ran this one. Oh, maybe it did. We tagged it and then we pushed it to the repository. Beautiful. That actually did work. All right, let's check out the Lambda function. So what we did here is we just said, hey, we fixed the vulnerabilities in our container, our Docker image. We found the outdated files. We found the vulnerabilities there. We fixed it, and we uploaded a new image to get rid of that. Now we're going to look at our Lambda functions. So remember, if we go back to ChatGPT, let's remind ourselves when we were talking about Lambda. AWS Lambda is a serverless compute service that allows us to run code. So we're looking for vulnerabilities in our code, specifically, I think, Python. At least you can do other things besides Python, but everything I always see in the real world is Python. Like when I'm looking at real customer environments on Lambda functions, often you can find secrets being stored in Lambda, which is always an interesting thing to find. But let's go ahead and check out by Lambda function. So over here on the left side of the screen, we have inspector and then findings. Bruh, quit popping that up. We'll do by Lambda function. And we have two Lambdas here. So customer feedback and tracking status both have at least one high vulnerability. DocG Money said, do you use a playbook or a checklist to go through, or what's the literal methodology you're trying to follow, or is it just expect the most wild, weird things and roll with it? I guess it depends. What do you mean? Like when I'm doing blue teaming stuff, red teaming stuff, both. And for pen testing, I have a very clear methodology as I'm working through stuff, both whether it's cloud or web app or on-prem. For blue team, I don't do blue team, but generally on the blue team side of things, you're told by your manager or whatever team, hey, here is what we need you to audit. Here are the vulnerabilities we need you to check or remediate. So it's less of a playbook. It's more of your boss is saying, hey, you need to dig into this, and you find information on what you're trying to do. So Amazon Inspector can detect software vulns and Lambda functions and classifies them to two types. Package vulnerability, which relates to vulnerable packages within Lambda functions or their associated layers, and code vulnerability, which involves issues directly in the function's code. It is able to detect code issues that could result in cross-site scripting, injection flaws, data leak, and log injection. So I'll click on customer feedback. So look at this. We have one high, and it's a log injection. Now, if you learn this if you're studying for the OSCP, but if you can inject into logs, and then you can then access the logs, like such as a PHP web app, you can then get full RCE. So it even tells us the vulnerability location. Let me zoom in a little bit here. It's saying, hey, on line 53, you have this logger info, receive feedback from user email, and then the user feedback. So it's not sanitizing this user input right here, and it's passing it directly into the log, right? Logger info. So let's say my user email is, Tyler@hacksmarter.org, but my user feedback is like a PHP RCE command that does like who am I or ls or whatever it is. And then once you view the logs, it would actually execute that command. So you can get RCE. You can think even if the attacker can't see the logs, you could do a reverse shell there. And then when the admin looks at the logs, it executes that reverse shell, and the attacker then has access. So that's what this log injection is talking about. It leads to RCE. So why are we recommending the following fix? Well, log injection attack that breaks log integrity, forces log entries, or bypass monitors that use logs, right? And sensitive information leak. So the cool thing is it even tells you, hey, here is how to fix it. So it's saying, here's what it is now on that line 53, receive feed. My VM just froze. Can you guys still see me? Okay, we're still here. I don't think the stream broke, but my VM broke for a second there. Anyways, this is our vulnerable code, receive feedback from user email, user feedback. And now we're doing, we're URL encoding it is what it looks like to me. We're URL encoding it so that even if you do something vulnerable, it will URL encode it, and it's not going to inject it into the code, and it even gives us the fix right here. So that's the fix that we need to do. Let me jump back to the walkthrough, making sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. User input is not sanitized or validated. Yep, exactly what I said. In a PHP server, yep, that's the same example I used. So clicking download returns the patch that contains the fixed code below that URL encodes the input. So let's go ahead and download the file then. So it's just what we saw. It's saying, hey, remove this and add this. I suppose if you had more vulnerabilities, it'd be helpful to download it. In a PHP server example not related to Lambda, a threat actor might try to deliver the following payload. User email that, and user feedback, the ls command. In a log, it would look like this, and then it would actually execute that command if it's a PHP server. But if we URL encode it, here's what it looks like. You're going to take away the teeth out of that, and even if an attacker tries to abuse that, it's not going to work because of the URL encoding. So let's go ahead and fix that code. If we go to customer feedback here, this function, here's our code and our code source. And this is actually where, when I'm doing real AWS pen testing, in this code, I often find hard-coded credentials. Like I found AD credentials here. I find Slack tokens here to publish to Slack. Either here or environmental variables, you might find some secrets. So on the pen testing or the red team side of things. But here is our vulnerable code right there. 53, logger info, receive feedback, blah, blah. We can go here, and if we just grab the fix right here, we'll just copy that, go back to our vulnerable code, and update it. Let me get my tabbing right there. So now we're just URL encoding that feedback, and that should fix it. We can go ahead and deploy that fix. And now we updated the customer feedback. Congratulations. We fixed a vulnerability thanks to AWS. And it says after a short while, we'll see the finding is removed. I don't know how long a short while is. Let's just go back to by vulnerability, all fine, or by Lambda function. So it's still showing it now. Age is an hour. I don't know if there's a way I can like manually have it recheck. We'll just keep it open. We'll come back to it by the end, and hopefully it's fixed there. But let's check out this one, our other vulnerability. Now that we know what's going on, and let's try this one on our own without looking at the walkthrough, but we'll still look at it to make sure I'm not missing anything at the end. So this one, the tracking status says it's vulnerable to SQL injection. So let's go ahead and see in what way is it vulnerable. So what are we doing with this vulnerability location? We are inserting into shipment logs, tracking ID, status change. We're giving it the values that, and we're initiating the query. It looks like our vulnerability is if a user is able to update the tracking ID and status change, they would be able to potentially execute queries as it's executing in the database. So that is the vulnerability. Why are we recommending the following effects? We detected a SQL command that might use unsanitized input, so we need to sanitize the input. But this time it doesn't give us the fix, but let me show you guys the power of AI. It's actually a pretty easy fix you could do yourself, but here's the vulnerability right here. That's the vulnerability. Let's see how good AI is at discovering this and fixing it. Let's go over here and we'll just say, hey, fix the SQL injection vuln in this code, please. Let's see if it identifies it. It should fix this right here. Oh, and here's another, I guess, not really vulnerability in this case, like code vulnerability, but you generally don't want to be passing secrets like this in the code, right? We have a DB user and a password and database information here. You'd want to use Secret Manager or whatever in AWS to pull those in securely rather than hard coding those in your Lambda code. So if I was doing a pen test, I would count that as a finding. And there it is. It actually does detect it and it fixes it. And it's just parameterizing the query, right? And now contains placeholders instead of directly embedding the values. This prevents SQL injection by ensuring the values are treated as data, not executable code. All right, let's go ahead and copy this code and go back to here, and we can go and update the code there, and we will click deploy. And I almost guarantee that's what the walkthrough is going to do as well, or a very similar fix to the code. Let's see if I'm right. SQL injection. User provided input must be sanitized before being used to generate SQL database query. Tag and create and use blah, blah. We can update the Lambda code function to use parameterized queries to ensure that the input data is treated purely as data and not executable code, effectively preventing SQL injection. So, yep, same exact thing we did. And actually, it looks like the flag is there as well, but we'll come back to that. After updating the function code, returning to the dashboard, and waiting a few minutes for the function to be rescanned, we see no critical findings. All right, let's... oh, the frick. Our resource don't exist, homie. Oh! Our resource doesn't exist because the finding's gone. The customer status one, the reason it says a resource doesn't exist is we're looking at findings for Lambda functions here, and it rescanned it, and it was like, yep, that's no longer a finding. It will probably do the same thing. Well, I know it will do the same thing for tracking status. It just takes a little bit of time. But our customer, what was it, customer something, is good now. It's no longer has a finding or a critical finding. We successfully remediated that log injection in that previous Lambda finding, and the flag is in the last Lambda function. So if you are doing this, you can go ahead and grab the flag. If we go to our tracking status, it'll be in the code here at the end. So if you're following along, there is your flag to complete the scenario. All right, let's keep going. IT security staff are trusted guardians of enterprise applications, data, and the line of defense to protect against threats. However, in larger companies where security roles might have greater specialism, you may not want the Amazon Inspector operators to have access to production credentials. It's worth noting that Lambda code scanning snippets may flag and show hard-coded credentials in plain text. So further reading, so from AWS, let's do a little bit deeper, like what can this all do? So Amazon Inspector support, blah, blah. Standard scanning, this is the default Lambda scan type. So we have a default scam, we have, not scam, scan. We have code scanning. Scans the application code, which is what it found for our code vulnerability. It found that log injection and the SQL injection by doing the code scanning. Scan behaviors upon activation. It scans all Lambda functions invoked or updated in the last 90 days of the account. So if it's one that has not been invoked within the past 90 days, it's not going to be scanned. So as soon as it discovers an existing Lambda function, it will do it. When you deploy a new one, it will scan it. When you deploy an update, it will scan it. And whenever it adds a new CVE and it's relevant to your function, it will scan and notify you. So pretty solid tool for scanning. And it's more than just Lambda, of course. We're looking at it here, but Inspector does, I think, EC2s and everything. Looking for vulnerabilities across the board that if you're on the blue team, you can audit your AWS environment and then work on patching some of those vulnerabilities. But hey, for those of you watching on YouTube, especially the recording of this, want to thank you for taking the time working through this lab with me. Hope you learned something interesting on Amazon Inspector, vulnerability management, vulnerability patching, code review. We demonstrated all of that in this video. So hey, hope you found it helpful. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. All right, guys. I was live last night for, I don't know, was that 2 hours? And it's getting late already, and I've already done like an hour and a half of boxing, so I'm tired. I don't think we're going to jump into another CTF or another lab, but wanted to at least knock one out tonight. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. Make sure I didn't miss any questions in the chat. Doc G Money said, from a pen testing standpoint, OSCP specifically, don't lose your cert now. I've been trying to build like an Excel sheet to ensure I run everything and then notate all, but man, yes. Actually, give me just a second. Let me show you my exact notes I use for the OSCP. Well, not my OSCP notes, but you get the point. Give me just a second. I have them in OneNote. Oh, wow. Why is dark mode not on? Bruh, you're going to hurt my baby eyes. My hacker eyes. Let me see if I can figure out how to turn on dark mode I can't look at this. Office theme. Dark. No, black. There we go. All right, let me make sure I'm not showing anything I'm not supposed to show. All right, I'm not. Okay. Here's what I did. So this is back when I was using OneNote. You can actually see like all my notes here on Linux Privesk, Windows Privesk, buffer overflow, web hacking, scanning enumeration, right? I have detailed notes on all of these processes. But what was most helpful to me was my page here called boxes. Because what I did, like if we just look at one of these random boxes, every port I would go through, I would have a separate tab for that port, and I documented my detailed notes as I was working my way through these machines, right? And let me close some of these. That way, when I was going through the OSCP, and let's say I encountered port 21, I could like literally control F, or search up there, and I could search for FTP, and it would show me every single box I did and how I abuse FTP, and then I would have specific things to try on the OSCP. And I mean, just to give you a glimpse, you can see all the machines I did. These are all the machines I did leading up to the OSCP, so I had them all handy here. I could control F my way through them and figure out what I was looking for. I mean, I have a lot of stuff in this OneNote from when I was doing. I have a full Active Directory thing. You can see, like, here's all the other stuff I have. So I take notes on every single machine I do. I may even do this now when I do Notion. I follow a very similar thing. Every CTF I do, I take very detailed notes on it so that when I'm in an exam or I'm doing a pen test and I'm like, hey, I think I've seen this before, I can very quickly look back through my notes and figure out what was going on. So DocG Money, you're using Cherry Tree, I would recommend Notion. Let me show you Notion real quick. I mean, you probably, if you've ever seen my streams recently, you've seen it. I've gone through OneNote, I've used Cherry Tree, now I'm on Notion. And I really like Notion. Let me see if I can find a good example. Okay, Paper is probably a good example, right? So here in Notion, you can do the same thing like Control F like I just showed you in OneNote, but you can see my on-prem labs here. These are just the ones I've done on stream. Here's the Paper lab. And I always drop my full mmap scan right here, but then I have separate pages for every service that I'm enumerating, right? So if I go to SSH, usually that's not the way in, but if it was, I would have my notes there. Here's HTTP, and I document like my full attack path as I was working my way through this machine on HTTP. HTTPS was the same thing, right? So there wasn't much there, but I have very detailed notes as I was working through this machine. And then if I was doing the OSCP, I could look back at, hey, if I discovered when I was doing the OSCP WordPress, for example, I see, okay, I was using WordPress here, and I can look at how I figured this out. So that's how I do my notes. Recommend it likewise. You can even see here's my web LM attacks through PortSwigger. I documented the main notes when I was working through it, documented all the labs on how I exploited it. Looks like I even have some, no, I don't have any subpages there, right? So the key for OSCP and these other things are take good notes, make sure your notes are organized, because if your notes aren't organized, there's really not a point of taking notes. You need to have a good way to look back at all the previous machines you've done so that when you're on the OSCP or another CTF or just a pen test, you can very quickly refer to things that you've done in the past and how you can figure those things out. Guys, I actually have a YouTube video called How a Hacker Takes Notes or something. Let me see if I can find it. I go into a lot more detail in my note-taking process there. Yep, right here. So you can just look this up on my YouTube page, but A Hacker's Guide for Taking Notes. I take you through very, very in-depth. Actually, this is using Cherry Tree. So when I did this video, I was using Cherry Tree myself. So Doc G Money, you might enjoy that video because I actually show how I do it in Cherry Tree in this video. If you want to stick with Cherry Tree, it's less important, in my opinion, about like what you use for taking notes. OneNote's awesome, Cherry Tree's awesome, Obsidian's awesome, Notion is awesome. It's less important the platform you use. It's more important that you just take good notes, right? Platform's always secondary. All right, y'all. I'm going to call it a night. Really do appreciate all of you hanging out and taking the time to be here. Here, I'll answer this last question for QuackLeb. QuackLeb said, do you think the knowledge needed to pass the CCNA is overkill for someone looking into web app pen testing and maybe some light networking pen testing like you, Tyler? Yeah, probably. I mean, the CCNA is an excellent cert. Like it will be helpful, but it is probably an overkill for any typical pen testing. Like the I would say Network Plus might be a good place to start, so you have solid networking fundamentals and knowledge. The CCNA teaches you really good stuff on how to use a Cisco command line to configure routes and configure routers. Helpful information. You're probably not going to do that as a pen tester really at all. You're not going to be in the Cisco CLI configuring stuff for the most part. Maybe for a red team exercise, depending on what you compromise, but 99% of the time, you're not using that knowledge. But you do need to have a pretty good understanding of networking in general. So that's where the Network Plus is good. Otherwise, the CCNA does do a really good job of also just teaching networking, and that information is super valuable as a pen tester. All right, guys. Gonna call it a night. Thank you all for taking the time to hang out with me. Hey, one quick announcement, though. My next Try Hack Me machine, CyberLens, Try Hack Me just notify me today they're moving the release up. So my next official Red Team Challenge room comes out tomorrow. So stay tuned on Try Hack Me's Discord and the website. Stay tuned for CyberLens. It is an easy rated Windows machine, very similar to what you will encounter on the OSCP. So if you're studying for the OSCP, I created CyberLens based on my experience on the OSCP. So very realistic when it comes to that exam environment, what you may encounter. So make sure when CyberLens comes out tomorrow, you give it a shot. I try not to make it overly difficult. So once again, it's rated easy on purpose. You'll be able to figure it out. There's no gotchas. There's no tricks. It's pretty straightforward once you get initial access, enumeration, and PrivS. So make sure you check out Try Hack Me tomorrow. Check out CyberLens. That is my next official Red Team Challenge room on Try Hack Me. But thank you, everyone, for being here. I will see you in the next